Hi there, and thank you for joining us on the Overcomers Overcoming podcast. We feature those who are in the process of overcoming or have overcome any type of life encounter, life obstacle that at the time seemed to be almost insurmountable. With this podcast, we have three objectives in mind. Our first objective is we want you to know with a confident resolve you are not alone. We want to work with you. We want you to know there are others who are working with you, who want to help you through whatever you are encountering, and together we will get through whatever you're experiencing.
Our second objective is there are multiple options for any life encounter you are facing. We want to help you develop a resolve that there are various options and solutions to any life dilemma.
Our third objective is to help you with critical thinking skills. If you're encountering something that was possibly a decision you made sometime in the past, and if you had the opportunity for a life redo, you would make a different decision. We want to help you with those critical thinking skills that can help you make an informed decision and not encounter what you're going through at the moment. We are the Cooper Culture, a veteran-owned business. We work with business personnel and families to develop and sustain connected relationship cultures within their families and organizations. That type organization is one where people feel wanted, appreciated, and genuinely a part of that organization. I'm with my wife and business partner, Marty, who has helped me facilitate this podcast. Today we feature Barbara Walsh, who discusses with us her diagnosis of breast cancer at the time of this recording about 8 years ago, and her devastation over that diagnosis. But then that inspired her to go into more research as to the potential cause of her cancer and what the remedies are to it. The short of what she learned from her research is her immune system had been destroyed or at least reduced, and it was through that, her diet and other things, that contributed to her cancer. She also learned that some of the conventional treatments for cancer, radiation, chemo, and surgery, sometimes themselves are carcinogenic. So through several years of research, she has come up with a natural or homeopathic method to help overcome cancer. It's a great story. Marty, what are some takeaways our listeners can gain from Barbara?
What an inspiring podcast and individual Barbara is in the research, the determination after she got over the shock that she was going to do research. She was going to prove you can beat cancer. It's an amazing story, and her wanting to help other women or men that get cancer find out that they can fight it, and here are the resources. She's an amazing woman.
It's a great story. Some people are going to be skeptical hearing about a natural approach, but she is cancer-free. Let's listen and learn together. Barbara, thank you so much for joining us. Our listening audience is going to be very interested in your insights, your research. You are a breast cancer survivor, and you learned how to overcome breast cancer through natural, or I'm going to use the term homeopathic methods. And you, it seems, have maybe dispelled some of the things that people have gone through, the methods and so forth. And Barbara, I don't want to suppose anything because I want our listeners to know I have no medical background, but I'm intrigued by what you have learned through life experience. Our listeners are going to be equally intrigued because we learn from evaluated experiences. Barbara, somewhat of a long introduction, but great to have you with us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate this opportunity to, speak with you and, share what insights I have.
Barbie, give our listeners just kind of an overview of, yes, breast cancer, but maybe what is it you went through, or were you all throughout life a holistic approach kind of person, or did you somewhat transition from, I'm going to use the term, traditional medical ways to the holistic approach?
Well, I definitely was not the poster child for healthy anything in my younger years, I will say that. And I was never one to really venture outside of the conventional medical box ever. It was really only once I was given a breast cancer diagnosis that really kind of triggered in me the desire to understand more. To be honest with you, when I was diagnosed, I was given, pretty much the regular treatment protocol options that are offered to every breast cancer patient, which is surgery, radiation, and chemo. And I had an estrogen positive breast cancer, so they wanted me to take an estrogen blocker, namely tamoxifen, pretty much for the rest of my life. Be honest with you, I think I was more terrified of the treatment options than I was of the actual cancer itself. And I felt frustrated because I wanted to know why that had happened to me. I did not have a history of breast cancer in my family, and I was shocked when they told me I had it. And so, as I was consulting with the oncologist and the surgeons, my husband was with me, and I just felt inside of myself that I needed answers. I wanted to know more about what was going on, what I was facing, what were these treatments going to do to me long term, because I know many people, and unfortunately, I think everybody knows someone who has, faced some type of cancer and, have seen some pretty devastating effects of the treatments. And so I couldn't really agree to what they were offering me. And it's kind of a sad statement, but it's really true that when you're handed a diagnosis of cancer, there's such a atmosphere of fear that surrounds it. Fear from on the patient side, fear of the unknown, fear of the treatment. And then on top of that, this fear is actually reinforced by the medical team because, well, they're afraid for you. I get it, but there's this huge amount of pressure that they put on the people who are being diagnosed to make your decisions about your treatment protocols like immediately. And the sad thing about that is that from my personal experience, you barely have time to process what they're telling you. It's like they're telling you this devastating news, and it's like you can't even believe it. Your head is completely spinning. The life as you know it seems to be, being ripped out from underneath you. You just are left reeling. And at that moment, they expect you to make another decision that's going to impact the rest of your life. And what I have found over time is that no decision that is ever rooted in fear is ever going to be a good decision. None. Regardless, even if it involves a medical treatment, when you're making your decision based in fear, you're just not thinking clearly. You're not. You're just afraid. And so you're reacting rather than making an intelligent response as in terms of your health. So we had to leave there. My doctor got mad at me and she basically divorced me and said, if you're not going to do what we want you to do, then I can't help you, goodbye. And so my husband was great because, he's very supportive, and we're both, as I mentioned to you, we're both Christians and we really believe in prayer. And at that moment, there was nothing I needed more really than I had to spend some time in prayer and seek God so I could understand what the heck was going on with me, and from the Christian perspective, I think at those moments it's a real challenge because you as a Christian, you don't ever really expect that something like that could happen to you, but it can, you know. And so when that was a tough realization for me because I thought, wait a minute, if this can happen to me, how did it happen? And as I started, as I was praying, I really felt like God led me to do a lot of research, and I learned so many things. Like I learned that I potentially had some input into the fact that I had developed cancer, because what I found is that cancer is not like this thing that's outside of us. It's not like a virus, like say, coronavirus or COVID, right? We'll take that for an example. Everybody knows about COVID. You know, COVID is a virus. It's out there floating around somewhere, and you could potentially walk into it, or someone who has it could cough or sneeze and breathe on you, and it could be transferred that way. Cancer is not transferable like that. Cancers can occur as part of the body's own regenerative process. So, what I mean by that is, our cells are constantly regenerating all the time. We have bazillions of them. That's the technical number. Haha. Probably even more than that, but constantly regenerating all the time. And sometimes in that process, a cell may not cooperate with the process and usually when they're regenerated, like some might be old or some may get damaged. Some may be damaged by diseases that we come in contact with. Some can even get damaged by types of choices that we make, like food that we put in our body or whether or not we drink things, certain, and I'm not just talking about poisons, I'm just talking about food, like I'm sure you hear a lot about what kind of additives are in our foods. Well, some of those things can affect our cells, right? And so when that happens, sometimes the cells go rogue and they decide they don't want to cooperate, and then they can't be eliminated and replaced by a fresh cell. And when that happens, that can be the trigger for a cell to start growing out of control, which is what we know as cancer. When I realized that, like, because for years I had been kind of secretly afraid of cancer because it always seemed like this mystery, like you never knew, you have no control over it. Is it going to crop up and kill you at some moment in time? That was my perception of cancer. And what I found was that you may know this, but it takes up to 10 years for cancer to grow in the body before it can be detected on any type of scanning or testing at all. 10 years. So when I learned that, I thought, wow, what was I doing for 10 years? How was I supporting my body for 10 years? And then the question also becomes like, well, why do some people get cancer and some don't? Why did I get cancer and my sisters didn't get cancer? Well, the key to that actually has to do with the power of our immune system, because the immune system is the key to that whole cell regeneration process that I was mentioning. And if your immune system is not working optimally the way it's designed to, then sometimes what happens is the body gets overwhelmed. We get inflammation in the body. Our cells get overwhelmed and then stuff falls through the crack. Your white blood cells, which are, your SWAT team of your immune system, they get overwhelmed. They can't be everywhere at all the time. And so you end up depleted and then something happens. That's going to be the key that generates disease or triggers the process of disease to start to occur in the body. And that was true for cancer.
Barbara, I want to interject here
Mhm.
that I need to ask you a very elementary question. And for our listeners, I'm an aerospace engineer, so please bear with me if I express my ignorance through this question. I process what you're saying that you, in hindsight, brought your own cancer on by virtue of your eating habits, your lifestyle, and so forth. And you found a way that by assessing what your lifestyle was, how to stop or let's say maybe you were shutting your body's immune system down not knowingly, but after some research you figured, okay, I think this is what's happening. And sure enough, that is what ended up happening. But I want to ask you, as my final part of the question, is your breast cancer in total remission? Did you not have to have a mastectomy, that kind of thing? And pardon me if I'm asking a stupid male question.
No problem. Go ahead, bring it on.
No, no, no. That's where I'm coming from. That
Yeah.
okay, everything about the cancer you did have is in remission. Is that where you are?
Yeah, actually, what I had decided to do when I was facing with my options, learning about the immune system, I learned that it made more sense to me to support my immune system so my body could heal than it did to try to poison myself, hoping that maybe I would get well, because most people know that, radiation causes cancer, chemo causes cancer, and the tamoxifen they wanted me to go on for in eternity, as far as I was going to be alive, is known to cause uterine cancer. As I weighed those options, I thought, and then, we asked the question, well, my husband said to the doctor, if my wife does this, will she be cured? And the answer shocked me. The doctor said, well, there's no guarantees. We'll consider it to be a success if there's no recurrence within 5 years. And I thought to myself, 5 years? And I thought, if I'm going to be bombarding myself with stuff that is known to cause cancers, it probably wouldn't be surprising if I had a recurrence after 5 years, or maybe after 10 years. It probably would be a potential. And so then I started to learn about my immune system and strengthening that and what to do for those, for that. And it just made so much more sense to me. And I felt like it was a real answer to my prayers. And I thought, I'm going to go all in with this. And before I did that, though, I met another woman who had been diagnosed with a breast cancer, and she had gone a completely natural route. And she said to me, you know what? If you're thinking about trying it, you may want to try it, because number one, you have more time than you think. Because when they give you that initial diagnosis, as I said, you feel like you're going to die tomorrow if you don't do something at that moment. But actually, when you think about how most cancers are slow growing, that you probably do have more than just 2 minutes to make a decision. I thought to myself, well, it took 10 years for this thing to develop. It might take another 5 or 10 years before it may progress to the next stage. So if I did absolutely nothing, then it would be like a 50-50 crapshoot, like it could work, the chemo could work, it couldn't work, I could have recurrence, I could not have recurrence. Nobody could give me a definitive answer on that. And so this woman said to me, if you do want to try something natural, you may want to give it a try. And then just see if it works for you, great. It worked for me. And if it doesn't work for you, you can always go back. You can always sign up for surgery, radiation, and chemo. The doctors are never going to tell you no. And I thought, wow, what a cool plan B, I thought. So I thought, what, I'm going to give this a try. I'll see what happens. I'll see what happens. I thought, I'll give myself 6 months, or I'll give myself a year, and I'll just see what happens. And if it doesn't work, then, definitely I would go back. So anyway, I went all in. I did a lot of detoxing. I did a lot of cleansing my body. I supported my body with, alternative herbal remedies and things that have been used, like in Chinese medicine, Native American medicine, that have been used for eons, that actually are known to kill cancer cells naturally. And I changed my lifestyle. I used to be really stress-filled, workaholic type of person. I never exercised. I ate a lot of sweets because that was my Achilles heel. I loved sweets. And I just changed everything about my life, because the way I ate, the way I thought, the way I managed stress, the way I didn't move, I started moving. I just did all of that stuff collectively. I had gotten an herbal protocol from a alternative clinic, which is not in the United States, because they couldn't provide this. They're not allowed to provide this solution in the States. So I went to where they were, and I used their protocol. They wanted to see me within 6 months. I went back in 6 months after doing everything, but I went hardcore. I did not slide, even though it wasn't easy. I did it all. I went back in 6 months, and they thoroughly retested me, and they couldn't find the cancer cells anymore in my breasts. So they gave me what's called the NED, which is no evidence of disease, which basically says you're in quote unquote remission. As of this month, I'm going on my 8th year of being cancer free.
Oh,
So
wow. Barbara, that's just what a positive testimony. I want to ask you, I'm aware of a person who was very recently diagnosed as having maybe 2 to 3 months remaining in her life. This is the fourth recurrence, if I'm thinking of this correctly, of cancer that started with her breast and is now metastasized to her liver, if I'm using the correct terms.
mhm.
But how long would it take for a person who has gone through, I'm going to use the term traditional cancer treatments, chemo, radiation, and all the above, and I'm learning from you that, in fact, all those kind of treatments are carcinogenic. How long would it take for a person to be able to or expect results from this holistic approach? In other words, let's just say that The doctors are correct. You may only have a maximum 3 months of life remaining if it is stage 4 cancer or whatever diagnosis. But is 3 months even enough to know that this holistic treatment is working?
Well, I would say probably it depends on the condition of the person. It would depend on how dedicated they would be to kind of go all in with the approach. I think sometimes alternatives get kind of a bad rap because it does take a certain amount of dedication to kind of go that route. You have to make the commitment to say, for me, it was life or death. I'm going to do this or I'm not, right? So you have to kind of go all in with it. I would say that. But I would also want to say that I was astounded at how quickly my body responded, even just when I started. Because when I started doing this alternative stuff, and I'm not a doctor, I was never into alternative anything before. In fact, I used to laugh at people who were because I thought they were crazy, right? But I thought, well, I'm going to give this a try. I'm going to go all in. And my goal when I started it really was I had an appointment to go to this alternative place, which was outside of the country, but I had to, set up my plans. It took a little bit to get there. I couldn't go there in a second, right? And I thought, well, I had about a month before I was planning to go to this other country. And my goal really was to try to get my body in the best possible shape that I could be in so that when I went in for this next round of tests that I could at least be at the best point I could be at medically speaking and as far as my body was concerned. And so I went and I did this detox. I did this first 30-day detox and I was really surprised at what happened. I mean, my energy levels improved. I felt better than I had felt in a very, very long time. And I know people sometimes they say this is a negative thing, but when I was diagnosed, had just entered menopause, and I was a woman who put on weight after menopause, which is pretty common for a lot of women, and I couldn't lose that weight. That weight just came off naturally without dieting. People, my skin looked better, my eyes looked better, everything looked better, and I felt better. And people who didn't know what I was going through. They didn't know that I had been diagnosed with cancer, but they could see something different about me. And so my point in saying that is that you would be amazed how quickly the body responds when you give it what it really, really needs. When you remove the stuff that's not serving your body and not serving your health and give it what it needs, you'd be amazed how quickly your body can respond. And in terms of someone who's, you know, given a limited amount of time, if nothing else, improving the quality of your life and your health for whatever time any of us has left is going to be a major bonus of deciding to try that type of a route.
Well, the person with cancer, does everybody react differently to this holistic approach, or is there a universal holistic approach for anyone? And I think what I'm asking, Barbara, is there somewhat of an extensive diagnostic process to customize the holistic approach?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Definitely. I mean, there are things that can be tested that it would be wise to test, to check things like especially your body's insulin response would be number one. Another thing that would be important to check would be your enzymes that your liver is generating, which is probably something that a person who has metastasis to the liver that would be checked. One of the biggies, though, that really should be tested, and I speak this out to women everywhere, is check your vitamin D levels. That's not something that people generally test, and it's not something that my conventional doctor ever tested, ever. In my whole life, I never remember, and I was a pretty faithful patient. I would, always go for the checkups. I did everything, whatever they told me, I did it. I did the mammograms and all that jazz. Well, I was never tested for my vitamin D levels. And when I did go the alternative route, my alternative practitioner checked me and my vitamin D levels were subpar. They were so low, they barely even registered. And did you know that there is a scientific link between low vitamin D levels and the development of breast cancer? So when I look back I mean, think about that. That's something that's a really simple thing that we can all kind of have control over our vitamin D levels. We can get vitamin D. The most effective vitamin D we get is from getting outside in the sun because our skin actually makes it. So if we can get exposure to it, our body will make it. But you can also supplement that with foods that you eat and also with supplementation. But that's not something I ever knew. And think about that. It's one simple little thing like that, how impactful that is, right? You can stop the generation of things like cancers by checking vitamin deficiency. So that would be another area that should be checked for sure. And something else, as far as even as breast cancer is concerned, something else that should be checked too is hormonal levels, because high estrogen, which is what I had, and I didn't know it for years, that is actually also linked to the development of breast cancers. So there's a bunch of things that you can check. And then you could see where you're at. And then once you know where you're at, hey, I have no vitamin D. I better get on that. It'll give you like a guidepost of where to start. And then the more that you do, you just keep adding as you go along. That's what I did anyway. And
Right.
you get improvements overall. Sure.
So for our listener who is, let's just say, all in mentally with what you're saying, Barbara, you're very credible with what you're saying, something of that approach. I'm going to believe, Barbara, and I'm trying to form this as a question. There are holistic specialists. You have to find them. They're not necessarily as widespread as, traditional doctors, but you find this holistic specialist and they will prescribe precisely what you need to be all in. That's a term you use, which I believe. But once you are all in, you and this holistic practitioner, if that's the appropriate term, would say, yes, we're very confident that this is going to work in the right way for your body. Barbara, I'm not even sure I can phrase the question correctly.
Well, yeah, it is important to work with someone for sure. I didn't have anybody to work with when I went through my own breast cancer journey, which is why I became a board certified health coach. And that's what I do now is I help people extrapolate this information and see what's going to be the best steps forward. And then I help them if they get prescribed any type of protocols to support them in the process so that they can adhere to it the best that they can. But yes, working with a holistic practitioner or a naturopathic physician is always going to be a really beneficial way to go. They'll also be able to help you to prescribe any type of other testing and screening and even monitoring, because there's certain monitoring and blood tests that you can get to see, how your body's responding, and then help you to, adapt as you go, because, you know, everybody's going to be a little bit different, even though we're all humans, we'll all maybe respond to things a little bit differently, and finding the things that are going to work optimally for you is going to be always the best way to go, for sure.
In the context of breast cancer, are you an advocate of mammograms? I have read different research somewhat recently that mammograms might not necessarily show breast cancer.
Yeah, well, it's probably not going to be a popular opinion. And I got to tell everybody, I might have said it already. I'm not a medical doctor. I don't have any medical background. This is all based on my own personal experience and research. And also, I think I mentioned to you earlier, I'm in the process of getting my master's. And so I'm working toward more of this stuff so I can help more people. My feeling about mammograms is that they can potentially do more harm than good. And I say that also because when I was younger, I had what was, you may have heard the term fibrocystic breasts. It's kind of a lumpy tissue that you have. And so this lumpy tissue kind of made things like monthly self checks meaningless, because it's just all feels like lumps. Is it a good lump? Is it a bad lump? I don't know. And so because I had that, now, interestingly enough, having fibrocystic breasts can also be a precursor for developing breast cancer. And I had no idea of that before, ever. And so because I had that, though, when I was younger, I was prescribed to go for mammograms all the time. I mean, I went at least twice a year, and I was always really compliant, so I went. But what I found out later is that, first of all, breast tissue is probably the most susceptible to radiation exposure. It's just as sensitive as a newborn infant. Imagine that. Now, you wouldn't send your newborn infant if you didn't have to get any type of x-ray, because it would be detrimental to their health. So that's number one. Number two, there is this major compression that they use when they do mammography, where they squash your tissue down, and it's painful to some people. It's really uncomfortable. at least. But the problem with that is that if there is any type of cancerous activity, typically what will happen is clusters of cellular clusters of this cancerous tumor will start to form, and the cells will start to replicate, and it'll develop into what's called a tumor. And typically when that happens, you get like a ball or whatever, like a globule of it, right? And this sounds gross, but this is what I can attribute it to. It's kind of like if you get a pimple. If you get a pimple when you're a kid and you put pressure on it and you squeeze it, it breaks the skin and it spreads out whatever's in there, right? That potentially can happen with mammography. If you happen to have a cluster that's contained of cancerous activity, a cell or a tumor, pressure can actually burst that and cause it to spread. And then you will have metastasis. And so, or you potentially, let me say potentially, I'm not a doctor, you potentially have metastasis. So as a result, I personally do not subscribe to mammography any longer because I feel like the potential risks are worse than the potential benefit. And interestingly enough, they have found that with studies that there's not much difference between early detection through mammography versus people who haven't had mammography in terms of the effect of the development of breast cancer or the long-term benefit of not having it. So it's one of those things. It's like a 50-50 thing. It can detect some things. The other side of mammography is sometimes it can detect things that what they call DCIS, which is like a very preliminary precursor to cancer or calcification. But there's no scientific evidence to prove that those precancerous calcifications will ever develop into cancer. So what's the point?
I want to ask you a somewhat sensitive question, but here I am, a guy asking, but it's some of our perceptions that breast implants are somewhat common. Is that something you would advise against because it could be carcinogenic? Again, I want to be somewhat careful, but yet I want to ask a question that I think is very pertinent.
Sure. I mean, I think it's pretty common, and I think as a woman, like I did not have surgery, so I did not have any of my tissue removed. But I do understand the feeling behind not wanting to not have some sort of reconstruction. So I think the problem though is that you need to be very careful about the type of material that gets implanted into your body. The other side of that is along with reconstruction, sometimes you have to take immunosuppressive drugs so that your way your body doesn't reject implants. And then there you have an issue right there because you're going to be suppressing your immune system, which could potentially lead to other problems down the line as far as whether or not you're going to develop any type of illnesses or other cancers or even recovering from those types of things in the future. So that's just my take on it. I don't condemn anybody or judge anybody. It's totally a personal choice. But I think the problem is that with all of this stuff, I don't think any of us have the full story. You know what I mean? We don't have the full story and we don't have the big picture. So I think it's really important to kind of get the bird's eye view and think, okay, what is this really going to mean for me down the line and my health? And then you have to make your choices, hopefully in a prayerful way with a really clear mind and with the leading of the Lord. That's what I have to say about that.
How can a listener contact you, Barbara? Do you have a website? Do
Yeah.
you do virtual consultations? How can a person follow up with you? And the person listening may say, I don't want to have a listening audience. I just want one on one with Barbara.
Sure. I have a website. It's www.goodnaturewellness.com, or you can reach out to me through email, which is healthcoachingwithbarbara@gmail.com. And also, I have a great free resource that I'd love to offer to anyone who's interested. It's called 5 Things I Wish I Had Known Before Being Diagnosed with Breast Cancer. I talk more about my experience, my story, and things that I did and the reasons why they are scientifically supported so that they could actually help you. So if you're interested in getting that, you can go to my website, which is www.goodnaturewellness.com/5 things freebie, and I'll be happy to send it to you. It's absolutely free. It's just, to be a blessing to you guys and to hopefully share something you didn't know before that can be beneficial to you.
Barbara, this is just great information. Marty, my wife and I, and Marty would normally be here, but she's on a wellness appointment right now. Marty and I are advocates of holistic approach. We do believe that sometimes the well-meaning medical community can, again, mean well, but it's not until we've been involved in something that after a while we learn that, well, by golly, what we hope would be of help, as I think your research learned, actually can be carcinogenic in the context of cancer. And there is a better approach to it. And I do believe that sometimes we, after having gone through various trials, we learned that, well, God designed us in a very specific way, and some of the man-made approaches are not as good as the natural approaches. We just need to, I guess it's in some ways, Barbara, relearn and revise our mindset, our ways of doing our lifestyle, conducting our life, and so forth. And it sounds as if you have made the round trip, so to speak. And through your research, you've got a lot to offer people. There is a natural, holistic approach. And gosh, let's go all in with it. Golly, Barbara, this is just great, great information. I'm just totally intrigued with everything that you are doing, and you're on a continuous journey.
Well, I really appreciate you having me, and it's been a real honor to speak with you today. And I really do hope that, the things that we talked about and shared will really help somebody. That's really the ultimate goal. If I could help some people that, they don't have to hear the words, you have breast cancer, that would be like everything for me, because honestly, when you know that there's something else that you can do, it's incredibly empowering. It really is, because instead of feeling like, your life is being ripped out of your hands, you can actually regain control of it. And then not only that, but you start feeling better. You regain your confidence in your health, your body, and your ability to, have a really impactful life, a life free from disease. I mean, there's nothing better than that, honestly. So I thank you.
Well, Barbara, again, thank you for your research. Thank you for your life journey. And thank you for wanting to share what you've learned with our audience. We look forward to continuing our journey with you.
Okay, thank you.
We appreciate having the opportunity to share our and our guests' life experiences with you.
The Cooper culture advances organizations to achieve and sustain high retention rates, connected communication, and trust through personality insights and principled leadership. You can contact us at our website, thecooperculture.com, and you can contact us directly at ron@thecooperculture.com or Marty, Marty, at thecooperculture.com. We work with you to help assess aspects of your culture to advance the environment and people to their best performance. We do that through our staff of certified personal performance coaches, leadership trainers, keynote speakers, and DISC personality behavior experts. You can book a speaking engagement directly through our website by contacting us at ron@thecooperculture.com. We look forward to sharing our life experiences with you, some of which are profound, some of which are pretty funny. Some of those life experiences are ones we'll never do that again because we've been through stuff. We truly look forward to working with you, speaking with you, helping advance you in any way that we can.